Hello, my name is Ladek, and I'm the Principal for E-Learning Advocacy at OpenLMS. The presentation you're about to watch is one part of our AI and Learning Summit. I encourage you to check out all of the talks in this series as we discuss the tools of today, the near and not so near future, and the challenges we need to address around these new technologies. Our experts for this session are Kate Gromova and Edgar Aparicio. Kate is a co-founder of Women in Digital Transformation. WinDT is a woman-owned and operated small business with the mission to help drive digital transformation in developing countries and support women's full inclusion in the social and economic digital transitions underway worldwide. Edgar is a senior economist at the PIT Policy Lab, a woman-led startup working at the intersection of public interest technology and agile policymaking with a focus on the Latin American and the Caribbean region. Edgar has worked as an analyst, project manager, and consultant. He has extensive experience in conducting practical research on socioeconomic impact of emerging technologies. He is also a professor of economics at ITESO, the Jesuit University of Guadalajara, Mexico. And he is a volunteer in the initiative Expert ODS of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network in Mexico. Please join me as we welcome Kate and Edgar on the main stage for their presentation about preventing and mitigating gender bias in AI-based early alert systems in education. Hello, Kate, and hello, Edgar. Welcome to the main stage here at the AI and Learning Summit from OpenLMS. Kate, how are you today?
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Excellent. And Edgar, how are things for you?
Hi, thank you for asking. I'm fabulous.
Excellent. I'm really excited to just jump in and start learning about what this Equitable AI project was all about. So why don't we start by bringing your slides on the screen and set the stage for us. Tell us what it's all about.
Sure, great. Well, the project we want to share about today was titled Preventing and Mitigating Gender Bias in AI-Based Early Alert System in Education. And I am very excited to share about it. And I would like to start saying that it was an executed project by an international consortium of organization made up for ITAD, PIT Policy Lab, Women in Digital Transformation, Athena Economics, all together with the aid of USAID and DIE. So can you please turn the next one? Well, this project arises in the context of the Equitable AI Challenge by USAID. So in order to support innovative solutions to identify and address actual and potential biases, gender biases within AI system or solutions within the context of the countries in development stages, our proposal was reformulated within a collaborative co-create process. So at the beginning of the 2022, a co-creation workshop was held, and all the members of the consortium gathered perspectives to promote equity within AI use case from the Guanajuato Ministry of Education in Mexico. So we were one of the 5 projects awarded with grants to operate. So please, the next one. So we work in partnership with the Ministry of Education in Guanajuato, Mexico. And I would like to say some of the backgrounds about what have they doing. Well, the ministry have been innovating its policy of education with the use of data and AI to inform the decisions. For example, one of the main innovative cases that they are working on is with the aid of the World Bank, they have developed an early alert system to identify students at risk of dropping out school at the secondary level. So they will be able to direct personalized preventive actions to this student. And so in this context, this project sought to mainstream the gender perspective, and not only in this early alert system, but in all the AI ministry project. So can you please go to the next one? So this project that have 4 specific objectives. The first of them was to generate capacities for the responsible ethical, and gender-sensitive use of AI within the educational sector, with a focus on this project that we are talking about, the early alert system, and many others that actually they are currently doing with data and AI to inform making decisions. So another very important component of this project was the development of an ethical guide and a checklist to ensure the responsible and equitable deployment of AI within the educational sector and within the public sector in general. The third one was that we use the AR Fairness 360 toolkit to detect and correct biases in the data inputs of the AI model. And fourth objective was to disseminate learnings with governments at local and international scale, focusing on South-to-South cooperation perspective and share knowledge and learnings from this project. So can you see the next one, please? So there are some pictures about the memorable moments of this project.
Edgar, could I ask a question kind of off the bat?
Yeah,
So
sure.
give us a sense of two things. One, what's the size of the state of Guanajuato like education system? Is there a way that you could give us a sense of how many students or how big it is? And then like secondarily, like how many AI projects is this government doing? Like this, I think for many people, they don't think, oh, Guanajuato, Mexico. Hey, that's a hotbed for AI implementation. Like, give us a little more context there.
Oh, sure, definitely. Well, the first thing that I would say is that all the state of Guanajuato has their own government agency that carry on public education. So we are talking about the team that brings education to all the states. In 2020, Guanajuato's population was about 194 thousand people. So it's a big city, it's a big state, and the government state also have other projects with data and AI. One of them was called educational paths. So they are a large amount of data about the whole history of their students from its beginning in the educational system until they are leaving the educational system. So it's a great picture of data of all the trajectories of all the students. So they are using predictive analysis to answer questions they have in order to make a better policies from education. And this project in specific, the early alert system, is the first one with specifically using AI to identify students at risk of dropping out, so they can inform their preventive approaches more in a more personalization from their needs. I mean, if there's something that needs to be addressed from one specific case, all the efforts from the government and the teachers and all the educational actors will be focusing and meet that needs. So there is another important project using data and AI, but I think the most flag projects are this early alert system and the educational trajectories, which bring together all the data from many years that Guanajuato has.
Super cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Great. So, well, we can see some pictures of the memorable moments, and I think that it's all. Thank you for this question, and it's the context where we are together working with Guanajuato government.
Excellent. So kind of what were the outcomes? Like you worked on this project, you went through the the process of working with the government, working with their databases, and then building capacity, like you said. What are some of the most striking outcomes that you saw?
Well, there were many results that we are proud of. One of them are these two products that will be able to everyone very soon, which is the ethical guide and the checklist for AI deployment. And maybe we can talk a little bit more of that in a moment. But I would like to share another learnings and notable products that we get from this project. The first one, I would like to say that one of the main results has been to encourage the debate around equitable AI, as well as for the Ministry of Education from Guanajuato team to ask relevant questions. For example, they questioned themselves how should the ministry communicate the results of the early alert system for school dropout to different audiences? I mean, how to avoid pointing out or generating stigma in the identified students at risk to abandonment, which is questions that are beyond the technical aspects of AI, but also they are very important. And other important question that arise within the discussion from the stakeholders from the Guanajuato Ministry of Education was how can the sensitivity of the AI system be refined to incorporate information generated in the field and how to consider the context of the students.
Mhm.
I mean, even when these systems are very accurate and identifying students at risk of dropping out, how can the teacher or other educational staff, operative staff within the schools can confirm or refute the predictions based on the knowledge they have, from the reality of the schools, from the students itself? So many of the questions that arise were how to refine that decisions and how to incorporate a human side into the automated decisions made by these systems. So I think that for me, one of the first of the most important results of this project.
Super cool. Kate, anything else that you want to add there?
Yeah, no, that the going back to this question about what was striking, that through our research and interviews, we have identified a lack of common understanding among the policymakers and technical teams regarding the key components that need to be considered then adopting AI systems. For example, what are the relevant regulatory safeguards which should guide the use of their AI technologies in specific countries and specific contexts? How can we ensure the ethical and enhanced decision-making process throughout the use of technology? How can we ensure the adoption of the AI in a secure and ethical manner? And how to run their policy-based, project-based consultation with the stakeholders. All these questions that the teams are usually, in most of the cases, in reality, these questions are not systematized and addressed. Then the teams start to work on AI project. They just do the technical work without all these, considering all these questions. So consequently, we conducted the extensive research, analyzing various available sources and publications, guides, checklists. We closely examined the experience of countries such as Canada and UK and Germany, specifically taking the look at what is happening in Latin America and particularly in Mexico. And this analysis led us to realize that we really need to create sector and country agnostic checklist and ethical guide, both for technical teams and policymakers. So then they can start to work on the process. They have a foundation, they have a framework which can help them to start asking the right questions.
Super cool. One of the things that I really like about this project, especially in the context of the summit, is that, we talk so much about today about generative products that are actually creating content or creating courses, or, how are we, making, creating efficiencies for teachers, who are delivering education. But this one actually, it's looking at that educational data set within the state of Guanajuato. Talk to me more about what is the fairness tool? Where did it come from? And how does that apply? So is this AI looking at AI, or is this, I guess, like tie that or unravel, I guess? What does that mean?
Sure. Well, I can talk about it. Well, the AA Fairness 360 toolkit, what is an open source toolkit. It was originally developed by IBM Research, but now is currently hosted by the Linux Foundation. And it is very helpful because it allows to its user to examine, report, and mitigate discrimination and biases in machine learning models within all the AI application lifecycle. So what we did in this project was take this tool uh, and use it mainly to look for gender biases in the data. I mean, the data set that fits this AI based early alert system for school dropout. So the first step, what we did was test whether there are differences between men and women in dropout reflected in the training data. And we find these biases through the use of equity metrics, and having found a a bias in favor of men, we use the tool with different features and methods that it possesses to mitigate bias in the data. So the next step, what we carry on, was comparing the results from the data sets with and without bias treatment into a generic AI model. So we run the model, we get the predictions, and what we found was that when comparing the results of both data sets, uh, without the bias correction process, I mean, if we didn't do anything with these biases found, 4 of out 100 girls and adolescents might not be identified as a student at risk. So consequently, these people could be left out from the educational policy that was aimed just to prevent that abandonment. So even when it's not a big number, I mean, 4 of each 100, there are people and students that needs that right for education that could be left behind if we don't correct these biases reflected in the data for many reasons. From remember that data somehow is a reflect from society. So many biases from society are reflected in the data. We didn't further research about what does it mean, but the thing is that the tool has the potential to be used to test other hypotheses of bias discrimination within the context of the same early alert system. For example, the ministry can test for other hypotheses from discrimination. For example, indigenous students from non-indigenous students, or students from urban context versus rural context. I mean, there's a lot of combinations that could be tested to see where are or not biases and fix it and work it better for everyone.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think you said it really correctly there. I mean, when you say 4 out of 100, that may seem like a small number, but then if you start putting zeros after the 100, right, then that turns into 40 and 400 and 4,000 and 40,000. If you applied this to a really, really large education system like the United States or the European Union, or you could really be finding a huge set of individuals that are experiencing bias that this needs to be corrected for, right?
Sure, totally.
Awesome. Kate, so I saw that you had those 2 products up there, and I guess maybe I just let's there we go. So the ethics guide and the checklist. Tell me, I think that you were alluding to them earlier, or Edgar was alluding to them earlier as well. In terms of, and again, I think this was one of the really cool things about this presentation is that we know that we are applying AI at a breakneck pace, right? We're just, kind of throwing it out there. I know many of the presenters, one of my questions for them is, how do you know if this is even true? Like what you're putting out there, right? How do you check what the AI is doing? So talk to me about what do these 2 tools or these 2 resources mean? Like, how did you create them, and what do they provide to, like, what's the intended audience? Who should use these?
No, absolutely. We believe that, and these are that will be public documents, like public goods. We hope to be that it will be published soon, and this is one of their key outcomes and deliverables of the product of the project. And as I said earlier, that there is such a lack of common understanding what it means to think about the bias and ethics, then the teams and especially technical teams start to work on the projects, and or then policymakers start to think from their legislative or policy perspective about that. So it's a little bit abstract sometimes concept for all of this audience. So we try to create something for both for policymakers and technical teams. And as I mentioned, we start with their extensive examination of the existing ethical guidelines and tools. While many of these guides are produced by the government organizations and they are not legal, don't have a legal or legislative power, they serve as a foundation for establishing rules, setting up standards, increasing awareness among government actors. Private sector companies, academic institutions, non-government organizations have also developed their own ethical principles and guidelines, and we examine them as well. And for instance, the University of Montreal in Canada created the Montreal Declaration for Responsible Development of AI, or CMind, a women-led active tank in Latin America, presented an ethical booklet for startups and companies. In our analysis, we research country level and city level initiatives from different regions. This include examining of the ethical frameworks, guidelines for AI procurement, self-assessment tools from countries, UK and Canada, Germany, Japan, US, cities such as Dubai and Beijing. And of course, we specifically focus on Latin America and initiatives and Mexican initiatives, and Mexico, for instance, Mexican agenda on AI, or the Costa Rican AI ethical framework, Buenos Aires AI plan. So we try to have this different perspective and have a global, regional representation of the different approaches. In the case of Guanajuato specifically, we aim to provide more specific guidance tailored to their technical team needs and their unique circumstances. As Edgar mentioned, that it's a lot of data being already collected, and that the quite an interesting outcome of the existing project being already the technical team possessed of these outcomes. So as a result, we ensure that we incorporate this educational angle into their ethical guide, specifically addressing the context of the educational sector. And the guide not only highlight their issues, ethical issues exist, but also trying to provide the set of example and approaches how to address these issues. And what we also try to include these learnings not only from global north, but also from global south, that can be applicable to the needs of developing countries, because this is the core problem of many existing tools and guides. Then it's created on the global north for developed countries, with their not considering the needs of their AI application in their developing environment. So that is why we believe that ethical guide and AI checklist could be useful for any AI project. More specifically, the ethical checklist is designed for policymakers and technical team who just think about the deploying of the AI project, or if they already deploying the AI system. It's a government context, not the private sector. So we focus the policymakers and technical teams for the government sector. As I said, it's sector agnostic, aim to assist the adoption and basically ready for any specific sector. The checklist serve as a questionnaire which help to go through the specific questions and create the score. And the score system is intended to help think through the various elements of responsible design and deployment and analyze the readiness of their infrastructure and team and policy framework, and mitigate the risk of the potential deployment of the AI system. We worked closely with their AI experts to ensure that the questionnaire is relevant and useful for technical teams. And we test, of course, in Guanajuato, so to make sure that all the questions are shaped to the need of their actually teams are deploying the AI systems. The ethical guide is more kind of a resource for the policymakers on the local level. Again, it's mostly target the educational sector, but the lessons learned can be applied for any sector. So again, I would say from that perspective, it's sector agnostic. And guide includes a glossary and the annex providing additional details on the case studies and approaches how to mitigate specific risks and work with the specific AI application. So we think that both documents would be resourceful and useful for any technical teams and policymakers in any country for basically any AI project.
Super cool. So okay, I guess you kind of stole my thunder there with my last question, which is, most people who are listening today are not from a government, right? They are from a higher education system or a corporation or some other learning environment. Can these tools be applied there? Like, could I put this in a university and not only use the guide and the checklist, but then also like this fairness tool? Could I use that in a system like that, or in like just Walmart, right? They've got 100,000 stat. Could I use it there? Like, what are the limitations, or does it have to be adapted for different environments, or is this only for government?
I can probably start here saying that checklist, I would say the AI checklist is for technical teams, no matter where you adopt the AI system. The only maybe the section which is related to regulation and their policies are less applicable, but the rest of their sections will be definitely applicable for any teams who are just start to think about their system implementation and adoption, or even design stage, and have some questions about the how to approach the ethical component. AI ethical guide maybe a little bit more for policymakers, but again, since we included a variety of examples and their risk associated with some of their application which was conducted in their own manner, that can give some good understanding, especially if you need to persuade some stakeholders within the organization to provide additional funding for additional steps which is required for right implementation of the projects. That could be a very strong message and can be a useful source for such a dialogue with their within the organization.
So cool. Edgar, anything that you want to add there?
Yeah, sure, totally. I'm agree with Kate. I mean, they're quite useful for any other cases. I would say that they're very valuable public goods for any actor that are recently exploring the potential from AI. I mean, even when we are working in this context from Latin America and Mexican subnational governments, where there are some degree of AI application. I mean, not every government are using AI in the same way or for the same purposes, but for every government, because something very cool with this project is that, as we said, we share learnings with many other governments from other states from Mexico, even other governments from Argentina and other countries within this region. So I think they're very useful, not only for these governments, but also from the actors from the private sector that work with them. For example, it's quite common from this perspective to see providers from the IT environment working together with governments. And I think that these providers, even when are not government actors, should know what a government expects in terms of ethics and responsible use AI. So when we are talking about the the GovTech ecosystem, or these frameworks of cooperation between private sector and government, we can set a base from what we're talking about when we talk about ethics or responsible use of AI. And regarding the AI Fairness 316 toolkit, well, it's quite used in health, finance, and other industries. So the same, it's a tool available for everyone that wants to test and find and correct biases in their data.
Super, super cool. I just want to put these back on the screen here. Do you have any idea where you said they're going to be publicly available? We're recording this right now at the end of May 2023, just to give a timestamp for everyone. Is this going to be, I know USAID is one of the funders there, so is it going to be available somewhere in USAID or a different place, or?
Yes, it should be available on USAID website. We really hope within next couple of months, but we will definitely keep you posted as soon as it's published there.
Awesome. Fantastic. On that note, Kate and Edgar, thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to talk to us about this equitable AI project. It's really giving us a different perspective on, rather than generating inefficiencies and those kinds of things, about how do we think about using AI responsibly, especially when it comes to biases. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having us. It was a wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much.